Ladles and jelly spoons, welcome back to Badgerworks. Today, this. This is a car. It is a Ford, a 1940 Ford by AMT in 1/25th scale. And this is what we're going to be looking at today. So let's get the box open and I'll tell you why I'm going to build this thing. Right, okay, let's get this stuff out of here. Ooh. It's quite nice actually. This is completely brand new, still wrapped up in the box. Ooh, all the tyres. So the reason I am going to build this was a gift, this model from Bunny Kitten Build, so thank you Bunny Kitten, love you. As many of you have probably noticed, I've not been around much lately, for one reason or another. And one of the problems that I've been having is I have been struggling to have any kind of mojo towards building anything. Oh dear. Which you will be pleased to hear Bunny Kitten has been helping with. So, to the extent that every time I express an interest in building absolutely anything, the next thing I know, one of them has turned up in the post as a gift. So there are quite a few cars that I've been looking at recently, thinking about. Well, that fits together quite well. And this is one of them. So again, this was a gift from Bunny Kitten along with many other cars. But the reason for this one, I actually wanted there's a car, and I don't know a great deal about American cars, so you'll have to forgive me, any of the viewers in the colonies. You're going to probably be gnashing your teeth at the screen at this, but I am a big fan of American cars. I just don't know a lot about them. And one of the cars that caught my eye recently was Ford did a four-door version of this, and it was called a Ford four-door, as in F-O-R-D-O-R, but four-door because it had four doors. And I've been trying to find one, and I haven't been able to find one anywhere. And anyway, Bunny Kitten found me this, which is the two-door version. So this is the close we could get. It's also brand new, as you may have noticed, which is nice. Now this is, as you can see from the box. Oh, hang on. This is a Coca-Cola branded version, not a sponsor. We're not doing it the way it is on the box. The reason I wanted this is because one of my favourite TV shows is Roadkill, which some of you may be familiar with on Motor Trend. Which I have followed for many years, from them being on YouTube to being on their own like TV channel. And David Freiberger, one of the hosts, has a I think it's a 1940 Ford four-door, and I really like the look of it, and I wanted to kind of do a recreation of it. Now, like I said, we couldn't get a four-door, but we got this, which is the next best thing. And so what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to create we're going to basically use it to practice some weathering techniques. And the reason for that is because I have another project in mind which I haven't quite started on yet, because I'm still gathering together parts for it. But that's going to be a car that is also going to be quite heavily weathered. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity to practice some of those weathering techniques. So that's the idea. This is actually very nice. Those seats can't be right. I'm quite tempted to keep those seats actually, because I have this other project I have in mind actually requires a couple of bucket seats, and I've not been able to find any, and I think these are going to work. I'm going to keep those, and I'm going to put this bench seat in instead. So yeah, that was quite handy. Anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to build this thing, but we're going to do a lot of weathering and rust and rot and things like that on it as well. So that's the whole point of this. Now, with that in mind, I have also bought, if I can get it under the camera, this. Now this is a rotary tool, but it's a cordless one. Now I have a corded one which I use and it works perfectly well, but I found this one in Aldi in the middle aisle. Ferex is their kind of own brand. Again, not a sponsor. This is just one that I picked up because I wanted to see how well it works. So we're going to be using that as well, because one of the nice things that I've got, and I do have some anyway, but you'll see. Hang on, let me get this box open. Oh, he says not being able to get the. How does this? Oh. There we go. This is going to be one of those days. Here, you'll see there are 3 burrs. And these are going to be perfect, hopefully, for what I want to do, which is basically to create some rust holes and rot on this thing. So that's what we're going to do. So let's see if this thing is even working. And then we'll crack on and ow, I caught my finger in the box. So we're going to start just by cleaning this up a little bit, and then cutting some holes in it and seeing what we can do. So yeah, let's get on with it. Right, so before we start hacking into this thing, let's finish off looking at it. I like the way they've done that. I don't know if you can see that, but it's got the side windows and the headlight glasses are actually moulded into the top of the windscreen. That's really clever. I like that. Now we've got lots of tyres here, which is quite nice, because I think the idea being is that you can either fit it with you know, these big fat drag wheels and like skinny ones on the front, or you can put the same big ones all the way round or whatever, or a mix and match. It has, these are all the chrome bits. So there are the wheels there. Oh, hang on, let's get this open. Oh. Oh, that's nice. It's got chrome headers. I love that. There's the shifter, door handles, chrome grille. Is that timing cover? It looks like it's got a couple of different options for bumpers and various other bits and pieces. So nice. Okay. Because it has got somewhere, wherever they are, there are some wheels here somewhere. There they are. So you've also got these wheels here, and they use those chrome hubcaps. So there's different options. Is that a supercharger? That looks like a blower to me here. I'll have some fun with this. Okay. What else have we got? Instructions. So here are the instructions. Yeah, it does. It has a blown Buick V8. Hang on, have I got the wrong? These are all in French. Hang on. Oh, okay. It has 2 sets of instructions. This must have come out of Canada or somewhere. Or something, but it was... Oh no, hang on, what does it say on here? ERTL company, PO Box 500, Dyersville, Iowa. Okay. But yes, there's 2 sets of instructions, one in French and one in English. That's fortunately made life a little bit easier. So there's a Ford flathead, and then 2 variations of the of a Buick, although it doesn't say which Buick. So yeah, okay. And there are the various different wheels, custom chassis and radiator. Yeah, so here's the interior. So that's the thing there. So you've got the bench seat, or you've got the buckets. And then different, oh I see, there's not a different steering column, you just remove the shifter for the customer and put the floor shifter in. That's fair enough. And we do have some decals in here, which most of which we probably won't use. There's not that many actually. So you've got the Coca-Cola branded ones and a couple of number plates. Georgia 40 Peach State. Okay. Right. Alright, let's put all these bits back in the box for now. And oh, there's a couple of metal axles there, so obviously so the wheels can turn. That's all good. Alright, let's put this stuff away. I find this a lot with these AMT and older American kits, is when you open the boxes, a lot of parts have just fallen off the frames. Now I have also just got this out of the oh, exhaust pipe. Got this out so we can have a look at it. It's actually, I'm thinking that's USB. That looks like a USB-C connection to me. Hang on a minute. Let's just unplug that out of my phone for a minute. Is that a USB-C? It would appear to be. Is that doing anything? It did come with a charger in the box. Let's have a look at this charger. So you're going to have to be careful with this, because it is almost identical to a USB-C, but on the output on here it says output 13.5 volts. So you're going to have to be careful with this, because if you plug that into your phone, you'll probably blow it up. So anyway, we'll worry about that later. So it's got a speed control here, on-off switch on the back there, and then a lock to lock the collet. It's actually quite light, which I was quite pleased about, because I was slightly worried that it was going to weigh a ton, but it's actually very light. So it's not fully charged up, but it's got some life in it, which should be enough to do what we want to do. So yeah, let's put this on charge, and then once it's charged up, we can see what we can do about getting this show on the road. Right, well, after a couple of hours of cleaning parts, I think it's time to give this little thing a try and see how it works. So I've just put a medium-sized burr in there, and what the trick is when you're doing this is to start from the back and work you out, because you want to thin out the plastic, but you want to thin it out from the back to the front, if you see what I mean. Because if you just go boring in from the outside, because this plastic is fairly thick, and if you just go charging in from the outside, then you'll end up with a big obvious like ridge, whereas if you thin it out from the back and then start working on the outside of it, you should get a better result. So I'm going to start here at the bottom of the door, and the trick is when you're doing this is to look at photos of real cars and see where they rot. And one of the places that a lot of cars will rot is along the bottoms of the doors. So that's where I'm going to start here, and then I'm going to do like wheel arches and things like that. But I'm going to start here and then see how we get on. So safety glasses, and let's see how this works. Right, that seems to be doing all right. Now, one thing I hope you can see is that I'm not going right down to the edge here, because there's actually a very thin bit at the bottom of the door there, and I want to try and leave that intact. If I can't, if I go through it, it doesn't really matter, but I want to try and keep that intact if I can. Alright, that seems to be working alright. And if you actually look, I don't know if the camera's really picking it up, but if you see from the outside, you can see it's getting lighter at the bottom here. And that's because obviously the plastic's thinner, so there's more light coming through. I think what I'm going to do, because it's getting kind of hard to see where that joint is, I think I'm going to take a pen and I'm just going to draw in that joint, because hopefully, yeah, you can see it's just showing up there, so I can see where the edge of the door is. There we go. Because I can go all the way to the end, but I want to get like the edge of the door. So right, I just got myself a little torch here. And there you can see how I've thinned that out. Oh. So we'll give this a little bit more. I think what we can do now is have a go at it from the outside as well. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to a smaller burr and hit it from the outside. Right, so I'll put a smaller burr in there. Let's see what this does. We're getting there. I'm not sure I like the noises this thing's making. Right. That is making some really weird noises still. Oh, hang on. Let's get some of that dust off of there. So that's not looking too bad, is it? So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep on at this and see how we get on. I do have some other tools that I have that didn't come in this set that I might use, just to give us a bit more variety, but on the whole that's looking pretty good. It's going to take a while, but we'll keep at it and we'll see what happens. Right, yeah, very pleased with that. There we go. I've just given it a quick lick over with a little bit of grey primer just to kind of unify it all again, and then just dropped it onto the rest of the body shell. But I think that looks pretty good. So what I'll do is I'll paint this part here black behind it to give us the kind of shadows and everything, and then when this is painted up with some suitable rust colours, and there's a few other techniques we're going to use on here as well, I think that's going to look pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is do the other side, and I'm also going to start on these wheel arches as well. So when I get round to doing the wheel arches, we'll come back and we'll look at how we're going to do that, but it's going to be basically a similar technique, just using some slightly different bits. But yeah, that's coming along quite nicely, I think. That looks suitably distressed, doesn't it? Right, onwards. Okay, so that's that side done. I think you'll find, I think you'll agree that looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn my attention to these wheel arches, and for that I'm going to use this larger tapered burr, and I'm going to use that to get in and kind of thin out these wheel arches. I might actually remove some larger pieces at the back here, and you know, just wherever, just to, you know, really blow out these wheel arches, but I'll kind of decide on that as I'm going along. So that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so there's that first wheel arch, probably 90% done. So what I did there was I just basically went in with this tapered burr and just kept it at a very low angle all the way around until it wore almost till the plastic just basically started to come apart. And then all I did was just literally just pulled it and just ripped bits off, so to make it look like that. So I'll keep on doing the rest of them, but I think that's looking rather good. I think if we put these two together now, oh, he says, go on, get on there. There you go. That's looking pretty distraught, shall we say. Obviously, one of the other things I need to do is go over the rest of the bodywork and kind of rough it up a bit, because it's a bit smooth, to kind of blend all this together. But I've got some ideas for doing that as well, so we'll move on to that in a bit. But for now, let's get on and do the rest of these wheel arches. This thing's going to look horrific when it's finished, but that's just what I want. Onwards. Okay, so that's the front wheel arch done as well, one of them. So that's the rear one and the front one. So I'm going to do the other side now, and I'm also going to do these inner wings as well. I've got to be careful on this side because the battery goes there, so I'll mark that before I do that. And I think what I'm also going to do is I'm also going to hit the frame rails as well, and just not as much because you won't really see much of this, but I'm going to hit some bits of it and just kind of just scuff it up a bit more than anything, and then we can move on to the tops of the wings and the roof and things like that. But I'll do the rest of these wheel arches and that, and then we'll come back and see what it looks like. All right, so the body is now suitably distressed, as you can see. I've also done the frame rails. I've only done it where they're kind of visible through the wheel arches. I also removed the molded in exhaust tailpipe because we don't need that. And the body is done as you saw before, so that's all looking splendid. I also cut the hood because, or bonnet, because I decided I was going to put the, it has various engine options, and one of them is for a blown V8, so I thought I'll put that in. So I cut that hole out, and I deliberately, I've cleaned it up a fair bit, but I might just distress this hole a bit as well, I'm not sure yet. But what I am going to do now is, one of the problems that I've got is, now this all looks great, but things like the roof and the wings and all this kind of thing, they all look very clean and shiny. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some texture on them, just on the tops, to make it look like they're rusted out. And the way I'm going to do that is with this. So this is cellulose thinners. So it's a solvent, and it will basically eat plastic like it's going out of fashion. So what I'm going to do is put some thinner on here, and then I'm going to use some 120 grit sandpaper, and I'm not going to sand it, I'm just going to press it in, and that will basically leave a texture. So I've done a few test pieces on some bits of sprue and things like that to make sure it's not going to completely destroy the thing. But let me show you what I mean. And this is always a bit of a scary moment, because, as I say, this is one thing where it could go horribly wrong, but nicely, the nice thing about this is the fact that because we're distressing this, if it does go wrong, it doesn't really matter. So we just basically put some of our solvent on the top of the wing like that, and this will flash off very quickly, so you have to be fairly quick. And then we just take our sandpaper and just press. And like I say, we're not actually sanding it, we're just pressing it in, just so that it gives us, and I don't know whether you can see that, but it gives us a nice texture on the plastic. And when we paint over that and then remove the paint later, this will actually come up looking like, it will basically just make the surface look rough and rusty. So we only need to do it really on the tops of the wings, and I'm going to do some on the roof. I might do some on the boot lid as well, and also on the bonnet. So anything like on top, because that's obviously where it would get the most sunlight and the most rain and weather and all that kind of stuff on it. So hopefully the rest of them will come out as well as this. I say, I know it's difficult to see on the camera, but it's hopefully once it's got some paint on it, you'll be able to see it better. And as with all of these things, you don't have to be too precious with it, because it's meant to look distressed. So we'll just press it in, just on the top there. And I say, hopefully you can see how that's left a texture in the plastic. This is 120 grit sandpaper. I mean, if you wanted to have a greater or lesser effect, you could obviously just use a different grit. I did some experiments with everything from 60 grit up to 400 grit, and it all works, but it just really depends on the effect you're after. So I mean, you could use different grits in different areas. So there we go. And we'll do the roof as well, like I said. So mainly on the front, around the front here, and then just like some patches across the top. And then we'll do the boot lid as well. This is the trouble, now I've removed so much material from the bottom, there's not really a lot to work with anymore. Right, I'll carry on doing this and then we'll see what it all looks like. So there we go. I know it's not the easiest thing to see. It's one of those things you can actually feel it a lot more than you can see it. So it's like, for example, in fact you can even hear it. I don't know if you'll be able to or not, but if you can hear that, that's quite rough. And if I rub my finger across this bit that I haven't done, it doesn't make any sound. So, but anyway, hopefully you can see what that's done. So I think we're getting near to a point where we can start doing the interior and then think about starting putting a few bits together. So let's have a look at the interior next. Actually, before we move on to the interior, there's something I I forgot. I was going to do it later, but I think it's actually better to do it now. And that's to add a little bit of texture to this. So what I've got here is just some cheapo super glue from the pound shop. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over where the sort of transitions and that are, and I'm going to add some little dabs of super glue. And what this will do is create a little bit of texture to simulate rot. Because this is the difference. If you ever look at rusty metal, there's a difference between rusted metal and rotten metal. And what we're trying to do here is create the look of rot as well as rust. So what will generally happen if you've got painted metal and it oh, come on, focus, and it has rotted, the metal's rotted under the paint will blister up. So what we want to do is just add some drops of super glue and what that will do is when that dries, that will give us a little bit of texture that will simulate that bubbling up effect of the paint. And of course you could put that somewhere else and just, you know, paint over it, because sometimes like the paint's the only thing holding the metal together. So it really depends on how you want to do it. What you can also do as well is if you've got some sort of really weak bits like this here, you can put a little dab of super glue on it and that will actually help support it. So just going all the way down the side like this, and just adding that little bit of texture. And so it also helps to hide the transition between where it's been ground and where it hasn't. And as you get into the corners and things, you can go a little bit more wild with it and sort of spread it out a little bit. Gives it a bit more of a three-dimensional look. So if I show you the other side that I've already done, if I can get the camera to actually focus on it, and you can see how that's created a bit of texture on it. And then when we remove some paint later, it will make it look a lot better. So as I say, I've also done these wheel arches here Again, if the camera would actually focus on it. Focus here, thank you. Oh, come on, focus. Hello. Hopefully you can see that. So I'll carry on and do the rest of this, and then we'll look at the interior. So as I said, we're going to move on to the interior now, and I'm going to try something here that I've never done before. I've seen other people do it. I've never done it myself. So this is going to be a bit of an adventure. Basically, I'm going to cover the seats. So the way you do that is you take a piece of tin foil like this, and I think I'm going to cover each seat individually, I think, because I think that will work a bit better. So the idea is, by covering the seat with tin foil, it allows you to add rips and damage and things. So scissors would be useful. About there, I think. So we'll cut this piece out. Like that. And wrap it round like that. So what we'll do is get some super glue, and what we want to do is get some of this, put it down here, like that, and then drop that in like that. Oof. Oh. But I'm going to stick this on, he says, with it not sticking. And then we can kind of start moulding this to the shape of the seat. Let me get this stuck on, and then we'll see what happens. Right, so I've got that bit sort of stuck down. What I'm going to do is just go over this with a cotton bud, because you can see by working that in like that, it basically shows us all the detail of the seat underneath. And all I've done is I've glued it along the bottom here, and a little bit on the side, and then a bit at the bottom there. So I haven't glued the whole thing down, and I'll show you why in a second. But what I want to do first is just use this cotton bud to kind of work in the detail of the seat. So it doesn't really matter if it doesn't fit perfectly, because it's meant to look like an old seat cover, so it will work like this. So a few creases and whatnot actually will just add to the effect. Oh. There we go. And so now what we can do is actually rip this. So if I just cut that, say there, then I can actually lift it with any luck, if that's... The trouble is with this tin foil, it might sound weird, but this is actually quite expensive stuff, and so it actually is quite thick. But there, you see, and then you can actually rip it like it's material. So I'll wrap up the rest of this seat, and then I'll show you what we're going to do with it next. Okay, so that's the seat covered. I didn't cover the whole thing because basically I didn't have a piece of tinfoil big enough. I couldn't be bothered going another bit. How lazy is that? But again, like I said, as I demonstrated very quickly earlier, so I've made that rip there, like that, and we want to just do a few more on the seat. And the thing to remember, so this is left-hand drive, so we want to do the left-hand seat more than anything, and it's a lot of the damage is from people, like, you know, backside sliding on and off the seat. So it's like down here, and just cut it, and then just lift it. And this is why you don't put the super glue all over, because you want to be able to lift it up. So I've only super glued the edges, so the rest of it is just where the tin foil is molded to the seat. So I'll just do a nice... You see, like that. See? Now you might say weird, but you can see the plastic underneath, but we'll get to that in a minute. So I'll keep doing a few more little bits and pieces on here. And it's especially sort of around the stitching and things, because that's where it will go first. Like that, you see. What you've got to be careful of with this is that you're using a sharp blade. This one's actually going a bit blunt, and you can see what it's starting to do is tear instead of cut, which is kind of okay, but it's not ideal. we go. I think that will do. So I'll quickly put some primer on this and we'll see what it looks like. So I've given this a quick spritz over. Well, I gave it some primer and then I also gave it a quick lick over with some black out of a rattle can just to get it black, basically. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start adding some detail to this seat. So I've got here this acrylic paint. It's called String-like, which is a thing. Anyway, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this to dry brush and bring out some highlights on this. Oh, that's way too much. Never mind. Bring out some highlights on this. Where are my glasses? Okay, so because what I want to do, because the vinyl on these seats, the back of it is usually like a white sort of colour, and that's basically what I want to do. But I also want to add some colour to the rest of the seat to make it look a little more worn. But I want to get the backs of these where they're ripped. I want to get the around the edges of the rips to kind of highlight them a bit. So I'm just doing it very, very lightly, and also to make it give it like a bit sort of sun faded look. But the main areas I want to hit are kind of like in the middle here, so it's basically where your backside and your back would be on the seat. Kind of like that. I think that will do. And now I'm going to try something a little bit different, if I can find what I'm looking for. Okay, so I've got some Mod Podge matte here. I'll squirt a bit of that. And I've also got some sand here from the beach. And what I'm going to do is take some of this glue, pop it in there like that, now take some of this sand and just put it on like that. And what that will do is just simulate the sponge foam coming up through the rips in the seat. That's the idea. So I want a bit more sand in that one. And just like that. You see? And I'll do some of the bigger rips. The smaller ones I'm not so worried about, but the bigger ones I'll do the rest of these, and then we'll go on from there. Now that's had a chance to dry, I'm going to use this. This is a very, very old Citadel acrylic, and it doesn't cover very well, but that in this case is actually exactly what we want, because what we're going to do is come in with some of this. And just dab it on and let it kind of run down into the sand, and that will give us our kind of sponge appearance. So I don't want it too orangey, because I want it to look faded. So just like that. And this is why it's always worth keeping even these sort of paints that are not a lot of good for anything else. You can always use them for something like this. And the way this works, because of the grains of sand are basically, you know, almost like glass, they'll kind of self-highlight. So there we go. And when we hit that with a matte coat, that will actually dull that down a bit. But I don't think that looks too bad, do you? Alright, we'll let that dry and then we'll give it a nice matte colour to knock the shine off it. So I've just painted a few bits and I'm waiting for them to dry, and while I'm doing that I'm just trying something here. I've taken, this kit comes with two steering wheels. There's the original one and like an aftermarket one, and so what I've done is I've taken the original one and I'm just wrapping it with some 1mm masking tape to give it like a steering wheel wrap. This is one of those things that seemed like such a good idea at the time, and now I'm doing it and I'm thinking, why am I doing it? But it'll look good, it'll be fine. So we'll just keep wrapping this around, and I'll probably find out that the bit of tape I've cut is too short, but that's alright, because if it is, we'll just add another bit. But I will get on and finish this, and hopefully by the time I'm done, the stuff that I've painted will be dry and we can move on. All I've done is, just so you know, is like things like the interior. I've just basically sprayed it black. As you can see there, I've also mounted the roll cage, and I added a couple of bars as well, just to make it a bit more roll cagey. Anyway, yeah, I'll get on with this and we'll see what it looks like when it's done. Right, there's our steering wheel done. Actually, it looks quite good, I think. It's there are bits that I've done better than others, but at the same time I kind of like that, because you know the whole point of this is to look like something someone's thrown together, so I think that will work quite well. So we'll move on from there. So I've done some work on the interior. Let me show you that first. This is just dry fitted together. It's a bit dusty in there at the moment. But I did the door panels and distressed those a little bit, give them a little bit of a dry brush so they match the seats. I think I mentioned before I've added some extra bars to the roll cage, or the roll hoop. And the seats are just test fitted in there just to see what they look like. And I've also wrapped the steering wheel, as I mentioned, so that was just done with some masking tape. And I've also distressed the dashboard a little bit. So what I've done here is I've just drilled out a couple of the gauges and then just super glued some bits of wire in just to make it look like there are gauges missing and things. And while that's all drying and things, I've turned my attention back to the body, or the frame body, because I decided that the running boards needed to be a bit more distressed because they looked a bit too clean and shiny. So what I did was I ground out the back at each end, basically until the running board detached at each end, because these running boards are usually only bolted through the wing, and so they have a tendency to rot there and then like sag. So I drilled those, or ground those out, and then just bent them down a little bit, and then I covered them the same as I did with the seats. I've covered them with tin foil, just so that I could like raise it a bit and distress it a little bit to make it look like the rubber's peeling off. So I just wanted to show you that while I was before I put some undercoat on it, because I got a little bit carried away working off camera. So yeah, that's what I've done there. So I'm going to put some primer on this, and then we can move on from there. Right, so I've been doing various bits off camera, you know, cleaning up the inevitable flashing and everything that's on things, and so what I'm doing now is I'm just working on the engine just while I'm waiting for various things to dry. And I'm not going to go mad with this engine, but what I am doing at the moment is I'm just working on the distributor, because what I want to do is add some wires for the like the plug leads. And this is another one of those things that you start doing and then you think, why am I doing this? But what I'm doing is I'm just making some sort of pilot holes to start with the point of the knife. This is a brand new blade, so you can see the point is very, very sharp. And what I've got to do is basically try and drill 8 holes in the top of this distributor. And then we'll drill them out a bit more, and then we'll put some wires in them, and once we've got the heads on, we can actually attach the wires to the plugs. So I'm not going to go too mad with the engine, but because I'm planning on displaying this with the bonnet shut, but you will be able to open it. So where's me? I'm not sure how good this, I might have to change this bit actually. Let's see how we get on. You don't have to go in very far. Right, let me just change this bit quickly. Right, let's try this again with a fresh bit. Oh, that's a bit more like it. So I'm just drilling these out, and the idea is that once I've got them drilled out, I can glue some wires in. So I won't do all of them now. Let me just show you what I'm going to do. So this is copper wire, and the easiest way to get this is basically just to take any old household flex that you've got and cut a piece off, remove the sheathing, and just unwind the cable into the wire inside, and you'll end up with all these little strands. But you see, now I've done that, I can just, that will just sit in there, you see. So to stick it in, you just put a dab of super glue on the end and stick it in. Now I'm not going to glue these in yet because I want to paint the engine first, and then I'll put these in. But yeah, it really is as simple as that. So see, it's one of these things that I've got to put the heads on, so I'll prep the heads, get the block painted, get the heads painted, then put them on, and then I can put the wires on. So I will drill out the rest of these. Right, now I'll do the heads, and this is where the fun really starts, because you've got the spark plugs there, but what you need to do is nip the end off the spark plug, like that, basically, because there is absolutely no way will you be able to drill into the end of that. And then you take the point of the knife and you just make a little dimple like that, and that basically just guides the drill bit. And then this is where the fun really starts, is you drill in to the spark plug, and you've got to do it slowly because this is very, very thin, and if you just go hammering into it, it will just split. And there you go, you see. So you just need a little divot really, and that's just to there's enough to sort of guide the end of the wire. So again, I'll do the rest of these and then we'll move on from there. So I've just been doing some priming of various bits and pieces, and I was going to paint these engine parts separately, but I was looking at it and I think I'm actually going to paint the engine as one piece. So I'm going to stick it together. I'm not going to put the blower on because the blower I am going to do separately, but the more I looked at this, because it's like, for example, if I put one of the heads on like that, if you look at that, you can see the top of the head is flat with the top of the engine. And I looked at this and I put one of the valve covers on like this, and I was thinking, that looks really odd, the way those valve covers stick straight up. And then it suddenly occurred to me that I believe that this is what they call a nail head V8. And I'm not entirely sure, well, I wasn't sure why it was called a nail head. And so I decided to look into it a little bit. I also noticed that these heads only seem to fit properly if you put them on a certain way round, like that. But I decided to look into this a bit and find out why it's called a nail head. That one's even worse. And it apparently, it's called a nail head. So originally it was actually called the Fireball V8, introduced in the early 1950s by Buick. And the reason they came up with this thing was because they had a very successful straight 8 engine for many years, and they actually weren't that bothered about building a V8. But apparently it was the introduction of the B body, and I've never really understood all these A bodies and B bodies and all this kind of stuff. But from what I've read, it was the introduction of the B body, which was a shorter engine, a shorter body, meant that their straight 8 actually wouldn't fit very well. And so they came up with this V8. And as I said, it was originally called the Fireball. And then they, it was apparently quite successful. But the reason it's called a nail head, and I did find some pictures which illustrate it very well, and if I remember I'll put one in so you can see it. But from what I gather, and let me show you when I put these valve covers on. That does not want to sit on there properly. Let me just clean that hole out a bit. So, you see the way those valve covers stick straight up? And so basically the design of this thing, like I said, I'll try and remember to put, I found a cutaway picture. But what they did was, obviously you've got the pistons, hang on, the pistons going up and down here. But what they did was they had the valve at a 90-degree angle to the piston. So the valve is going straight. So the valve is at 90 degrees to the top of the head, I should say. So the valve is going straight up and down, whereas the piston is going like this. And so apparently when you take the valve covers off and you have this row of valves sticking up, it was described as them looking like nails hammered into a plank of wood. And that's why it became known as the nail head. So there you go. I didn't know that. Maybe you did, but if not, you do now. As I say, now I've got this on, what I'm going to do is let this dry, and then I'm going to paint this all as one piece. And looking at pictures, they were painted either a light or a dark blue. And some of them look like they were kind of a metallic blue, and I think I have a metallic blue, so I might do it that colour. But yeah, I just thought you might be interested as to why these are called nail heads, because I didn't know, but I do now, and now so do you. Anyway, onwards. Okay, so I've been doing bits kind of all over the place here, on and off. I've got the interior put together, and what I'm going to do now, because obviously once it's in there I won't be able to do anything else to it, I'm going to put some pigments on this just to make it look a bit dusty and old. So these are some MIG pigments that I've had for ages. I bought these cheap at a model show, and they're really useful. So there's two here that I'm going to use, Gulf War Sand and Standard Rust. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some on the seat and things, not so much the rust, that's going to go on the floor, but I'm going to put some of this on the seat and everything just to make it look dusty. So let's see how well this works. So to apply this, I'm just going to use this. This is actually one of these brushes that you sometimes get in the Airfix starter kits. Is it Airfix or Revel? One of the two. But it's like a two-ended brush, and they're actually quite handy for this kind of thing. So let me glasses. And so what I'm going to do is you just get some on the brush and just kind of work it into the cracks and crevices. And it's just to kind of make it look like it's not been cleaned out for a long time. Get some on the floor as well. This is quite difficult to do because the camera keeps getting in the way. I mean, the comical part of all of this is once this is done, you won't be able to see any of it. I've dry fitted all this together, the interior, into the body, and once it's in there, you can't actually see any of this. So I'm doing this for my benefit more than anything else. But there you go. Oh, this is really awkward to do in front of the camera. Right, like that. And then we'll get some of this rust and put it on the floor. It doesn't really matter if the two mix together. I did toy with the idea of actually putting some holes in the floor, but again, it's just like once it's in there, you can't see in this, you can't see any of this at all. So it seems a little pointless. I mean, if it was a convertible or something, then I would do it, but I'll put a little bit of this on top of the dash as well. Just like that, you see. And now this is small clad, but this is pigment fixer. So they have their own brand of pigments, war pigs. I've got one of them, the dirt one. We'll probably use that later. But this is a pigment fixer. So what this does is you put it on, and it basically keeps everything, locks the pigment in place. So what I'm going to do is put some of this in a little pot. What you don't want to do is put this in a, put the brush back into the bottle, because otherwise you'll end up with pigment in there, which you don't want. And this is the tricky bit. So what you do is just wet the brush and just touch it like that, you see. And what it does is it will just spread out and lock the pigment in place. Now you've got to be careful with this, because this is actually a solvent, and if you actually like rub the brush across it, it will just take the paint straight off. So don't do that. So just like that, you see. And the same down here. And it just soaks into the pigment and locks it in place. So I'll get on and do the rest of this, and then we'll see what it looks like. Right, there we go. That looks alright, doesn't it? And just to prove that what I was saying earlier, this is why you don't want to put the brush in the bottle, because you can see the brush, as I've been putting it in, has picked up some of the pigment, and so that would have ended up in here, which you don't want. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit this with some matte lacquer, just to really seal everything in place, and then I think we can start about putting the interior into the body shell. So let's do that. Now, one more thing I'm going to do before I put the interior in to this glass is I'm going to paint it with this X19 smoke. And the reason for that is because obviously this glass, well, it's not glass, it's plastic, and it looks like plastic. So what I'm going to do is give it a coat of this, and this will actually make it look like tinted glass. It works really well. It's a thing I learnt years ago, and it's stood me in good stead. But here's the thing, you need to apply it with a brush, and because if you spray it on, it looks rubbish. And you need to be quite quick with this, because you want one nice even coat, and it starts to dry really fast, so you have to be pretty quick, like that. It's literally as simple as that, and that will actually make this look a lot better. So I'll do this quickly before everything starts to dry, because if you work it too much, you leave streaks in it, and that's not what you want. So you've got to put it on fairly heavy, and that's why I'm using this broad flat brush. Like that, because if you work it about too much, you end up getting streaks in it, and it looks awful. So you apply quite a heavy coat, and then just leave it. and let it dry, and you'll see the difference when it's dry. So there you go, hopefully you can see that, but that's giving it a much better look. I'm not worried about the odd streaks on this one because it's meant to look old, but I'd usually be a lot more careful with it. But hopefully you can see that that now looks more like smoked glass, and it looks, especially from the outside, it looks a lot better, and it looks a lot less like plastic and more like glass. So now that's dry, we can put the interior in. So this is fun. I have had this interior in and out of this car a few times, just test fitting it and making sure it goes in, but it's still very tricky to get it in. Oh, go on, get in there. There we go. Alright, let's get that in place. Because there's two little tabs at the front that you have to get in. Like that. Come on, get in there. Oh. That's it. They're going like that. And then the back fits over the glass like that. And something like that. Let's see if we can get this stuck in. Right, we'll just hold that in place for a minute. And then I've got the fun of masking up all the windows. Yay! It's fine. Right, onwards. Right, I've just finished masking this up. So the windows are fairly straightforward. The tricky bit was doing the interior, because obviously there's no glass. So I used some of this sponge. This is just, these are like washing up sponges you get from the pound shop. They come in like 6-inch square sheets. And so I just cut a piece wide enough to fit in there, and then threaded it right through the whole car, and then kind of curved it down behind the doors to hold it in place. And it's not perfect, because you can see there's a little bit up there, but that's, I'm not worried about a little bit of overspray there, but it will keep the worst of it out, and that's the main thing. So the next thing I need to do is start painting this thing. Now what I'm going to do first of all, that's actually not fixed on there, that's just, that was a test fit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by painting here and inside these wings here. So I'm probably going to paint this first, and the reason for that is because obviously there are holes in the bodywork here that you can see through, and so I don't want to leave the grey primer because you'll be able to see it. So I'm going to paint these two parts separately. We'll put the primer on them, and then I'm going to put them together. And I'm also going to prime this separately as well, because there's quite a lot of work to do on where I've roughed up the frame. I want to try and do these bits before I put it in, because it will just make it a bit easier. The underside I'm not overly concerned about, because you won't see it. So that, I think, is going to be next. So this is where we've got to so far, and I think I'm going to draw a line under this video here, because it's getting quite long. And I think I'm going to make this a 2 or maybe even a 3-part video. So we've got all the damage done, we've got it in primer, and I think we're ready now to start putting some paint on it. And I think it makes sense to kind of pause here and can pick this up in another video. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this so far. As I said, this is leading towards another project, which hopefully you'll all find as exciting as I do. So thank you all very much for watching. If you are feeling a little flush, then do feel free to give me a bit of a follow on Patreon. And if not, then you're always welcome to join us in the staff canteen on Facebook. So yeah, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in part 2. Cheers. Bye.